Good evening. How are you? Well, it's 80-something degrees. It's past 7, and there's no wind to speak of. But it's kind of a beautiful evening. I am aware of the fact that we've been talking about Prigozhin and Putin all day, the two peas in a pod. And what they're discussing, it appears at a distance now, is a suppressed protest that may or may not have been military, but is being cast today as if it was an objection of sorts, and it wasn't a warful confrontation. That's the best we can say about it. But as a result, while no one is going to jail, Mr. Prigozhin and his mercenaries are all being told to go to Belarus. And they were told not to go to their families. So I don't know if I was one of the mercenary soldiers, if I wouldn't hightail it out of there to some other section of Russia. Or time to emigrate, who knows. We're covering it wall to wall in a way that we don't cover our own politics. And I'm not sure that our speculations give us much information. But today it feels like Putin is of firmer stuff, because he made a public statement in which he was pushing back pretty hard against Prigozhin. And Prigozhin, independently or not, he pushed back a little bit too. So this is a situation that's not going away soon. In frivolous news, we have Jesse Waters is at Fox, who used to do the O'Reilly show and has been very active over there. He is taking over Tucker Carlson's slot, and I suppose he's up to it. I was on a show with him once, well, more than that, but once in which it was right after Trump had won the election. And I think the question had to do with our border security and Trump's basically discriminating response to how to handle it. And so I was on, and Jesse Waters was doing the show instead of O'Reilly, and he says to me, you know, what did I think about it? And I told him, and I said, but what else can you expect from a man-child? And he said, man-child? How could you say that? He's your president. And I said, well, he's not my president. And the other guest that they had there, I guess who was expected to shout me down if I said such things, said I should be embarrassed by what I said. And I said, well, we could call him His Accidency. So I got such hate mail after that. Not that I did much Fox after Trump was elected, because it became a meaner place. And I know you may not remember that it could be less mean. I don't mean it was agreeable. I went on there to flex my disagreeable muscles, and I was usually received as if I had a different point of view, and they tried to argue, and Fox did have shouting, and I accustomed myself to ways and techniques to get my word through, even with Jesse Waters. So I expect he'll be more of the same, and it remains to be seen if his humor is going to be enough to overcome his sincerely held terrible views. But that's that. On the category of gun violence, I reported, well, I didn't report it, but I mentioned an incident in Kansas. So last night, or really over the weekend, there was an incident, and they only know about the matter when on Sunday, a couple that had been celebrating its 50th anniversary didn't show up at church. And it appears that there was a home invasion, and they killed by knife 3 people, including the couple that had been celebrating its 50th anniversary. How much property could they have that if they just took it without killing anybody, that couple would be alive today, accepting well-wishing and gratitude that they had achieved such a personal accomplishment as getting along for 50 years. It's a shame. Now, Going up the ladder a little bit, talking about Roberts and the so-called Supreme Court, he's getting pressure from Republican senators to do something, particularly about Thomas and Alito. And Alito, among other things he's done, is he went on that very special fishing expedition. And apparently when asked, because he's been talking to people, what he thought about not reporting it on his disclosure statement, was he thought it was a personal hospitality. Personal. These guys just make up things. He makes up the law. It's a very weak excuse for a man who's supposed to have a superior brain, which is malfunctioning on the court, and apparently on his mysterious reading of what his ethical responsibilities are. And, don't be confused about this. From the moment you're sworn in as a lawyer, you have already behind you studies in ethics, because there are difficult questions that come up. And sometimes you consult with the Bar Association or other counsel in your firm or that you trust. These guys know what the rules are. He knows that this is not some sort of special hospitality, personal hospitality. The judges that I've known often wouldn't even have lunch with other people. It became monastic in a way because they were so isolated. And when I sat as a judge for civil commitments, they were upset that I had my picture taken with the Attorney General. Now, so you understand, civil commitment it's public, but it's difficult to get to. So there's like no public impression of why one would care to help those who presented themselves at court and may have been a threat to themselves and to others, and that we dealt with those commitment cases. And they fell into three categories. People who were drunk and were okay by the 48 hours or so that I'd see them. People who were schizophrenic, and if the medication worked, you wouldn't know they'd had a problem 2 days before. And then schizophrenics for which medication doesn't seem to work. It's particularly sad cases. And, there's a defense counsel, there's counsel from professionals at the hospital. Because they don't have funding, you serve both as a judge and you sort of investigate the case sitting as a judge on the matter. And I enjoyed it because I thought we helped out people a lot. So, but what about this court? The stern rules applied to you for civil commitments, and the Supreme Court of the land says, what's a little money on a fishing expedition? Alito deserves to resign, and Roberts has to do something, and if he doesn't, Congress will try to do something. And I never know if you're on the right side of an issue if Lindsey Graham is agreeing with you, the former chair when the Republicans were in charge of the Senate. But he says something has to happen, but, he's like a weather vane. You never know where he really is. There are a couple of stories involving Judge Luce Cannon down in Florida on the Mar-a-Lago case involving Trump. It turns out the government has 84 witnesses that it feels Trump should not have any contact with, as per the judge's order. And he wanted it sealed, which makes sense to me because we don't want them harassed. And there is a history of harassment. And Judge Cannon said, no, you don't get to seal them. She's wrong for reasons of safety and so forth. And she said the government can find other ways. Well, even this trial, there's, people are talking, we want to have a televised trial. We're not thinking of the jurors. You're thinking of the general public. But what about the jurors who are under threat? And this is like a mob trial. And Trump is like a mobster with his physical threats and his, implied violence and implied coercion. And by his outright and visible coercion. Just play the tape in Georgia and listen to what he said there to the Secretary of State about how, you couldn't, there might be a criminal case here against you. So, it's another step that she's wrong. And another feather in our cap, that is a cap that says we should move to recuse her. Because at the worst possible moment, she's going to do something wrong, really wrong, unjust, unconstitutional, favoring Trump. And so I think we have to act upon that. The other thing also involves my man, Blackjack Smith. You know of the electors, that is the phony electors who agreed to pretend to be electors who knew about fraud in the election, and based on that, they had this rump group that was going to come to the Hill and was going to say, you got to give us another recount. You have to send this back to the states to have them think about it, and we're here for that purpose. Well, at least 2 electors sought immunity and obtained it. Now, I say it's a limited kind of immunity, so you understand what that is, and apologies to those who already know it. I do think a lot of the talking heads are telling us things we know. Do you know what a subpoena is? Yeah, I think I got a good idea what that is. But use immunity and transactional immunity are something that, people who don't do criminal cases might not even know. Prosecutors would know. And you know the sense, because we've had a lot of talk about pardons, but it's not a pardon. Use immunity says whatever you testify, say in the grand jury or at a trial, we can't use that against you. Now, sometimes it says you can't use that as leads to get other information, say to prosecute you. Now, transactional immunity, that's the whole shebang. You're protected against what you say, and they won't prosecute you for a crime or crimes that are agreed upon when you get the immunity. So 2 people have use immunity. That would, I suspect, the reports are only that it's limited immunity, and so I assume it's use immunity. And what that means to me is that they probably don't have any intention of prosecuting them anyhow, and they're more interested in getting the information, and these are low-level people who, in a limited fashion, said, yeah, I'll be one of those electors, and probably did other things, and they were active, and now reality is caught up with their insane won't you hold my beer bottle approach to our national affairs, running a fair and open and democratic and Republican government. So, now, these 2 are not the only ones. There have been other witnesses. There were some witnesses before the Justice Department was forced to pay attention to the investigation of the people who were really running show in the Oval Office and on the Hill and out in the streets with pocketbooks of money and formally connected Republican operators, if you will. So the fact that they're anxious that people respond quickly to their subpoenas and don't delay is the kind of thing that suggests that they don't want any delay because the grand jury may be running out. But, more importantly, they may want to file an indictment against the bad guys. That'd be a shame, huh? So that's the main news. Today, I had an issue in one of my cases, and I'm mentioning it because this is an epidemic in America. Now, I'm talking about what do we do for pain patients in America? And the answer is, we've turned them into enemies of the people undeservedly because they really have pain, and that the medications that you can use make a difference, save people from committing suicide, give them a life, if it's not without pain, at least it's with a more bearable pain than 10 being the maximum. It might be 3 or 2. It may be 7. The difference makes a whole other world for the person who has pain. America is now running its mouth about, fentanyl this and fentanyl that. Yes, when not prescribed and mislabeled because you're buying it off the black market in Mexico. And maybe you think you're getting oxycodone, but you're really getting fentanyl that came from a lab, and there's no quality control. And people die. Now, we don't do so well in America at giving people reason not to go off and try these drugs. And one of the reasons that people are getting these drugs is because DEA and our government has decided that if you're taking pain medication, well, shit, you have to be an addict. Only addicts take it. And I can tell you from personal experience, I've been doing these cases since 2006, that these are not addicts. These are people who actually can function and be family members because of the pain medication. And it's a complicated business, and not all patients are equal. That is to say, some can take on more pain medication, which makes them normal, meaning they function like you or I, if you and I presently don't have a pain problem. And we're not talking acute pain. That is, I hurt my elbow while fooling around with a friend at some picnic we all went to. Acute pain goes away in a day or so. Chronic pain, forever, unremitting, no escape from it except suicide. Now, I have a case in which a doctor was told by the DEA, we think that what you're doing is not safe to the community and is a major emergency, and we're telling you you can't issue any more prescriptions. And that put more than a couple of hundred people at risk who required upon this pain medication. Now, there have been a couple of people who've died since I went in the case and demanded that they allow the doctor to give this pain medication. And by various procedural problems, including the fact that basically DEA runs a secret proceeding that you can't know anything about except the final decision, and even that is not easily accessible. And the decision is not made by an administrative law judge. It goes to an administrator of the DEA who then upholds what the administrative law judge did in secret. And so the doctor in the case has provided information to me, or I wouldn't know anything on behalf of the patients. Well, today I got news that our lead petitioner in the case in the Court of Appeals, where we're seeking to have our day in court about whether or not somebody can withhold the medicine from the patients, as the government has, by preventing the doctor from using his formerly very helpful ability and authority to prescribe pain medication. And there are a lot of people suffering, but now we have a husband who's beside himself because he's been married these many years with his wife, and they've been working on this problem, and I intend not to have her removed from the case. There is a way, and I hope that the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals will agree, that he can stand in her place in the case. And it may be mostly symbolic, and it may give him some closing, and he's grieving terribly now. And what's the moral of the story? Our government kills people all the time, by rules that make no sense. Depriving people of pain medication is just one example. Children that we don't take care of, who suffer and die by neglect. Not doing anything about guns. People die, just like this couple, 50 years married, celebrating it. Could you have another contrast more shocking or surprising? If you were to put it in a book, fiction, and ask an editor to approve it, they say, it's implausible. That could never happen. People on their anniversary. Government doesn't care if they kill us with fumes from the fossil fuels beneath our feet. That they won't do anything about the waters that we're losing because of climate control when we have no control. When we talk about doing something and we do little things to buy ourselves, that is the government to buy itself, a reputation for being environmental. How can a Democratic Party be environmental when we have a West Virginia senator always pushing the envelope, always joined in with these fossil fools who compromise life and safety? How can we respect the law when plainly there are different laws for different people? How can Judge Cannon preside over that case? Why, for an instant, would you not make the motion? Let the courts be wrong, but do what's right for a fair tribunal. Fairer than some might say Trump deserves. And people talk about, he's innocent until proven guilty. Well, forget that shit. He is not innocent. We've all seen it. We know he's not innocent. And the question is, can he weave a defense or delay it or get himself a pardon? Let's deal with the real facts, not some imaginary construct of how our system of government works, because it doesn't work. It's not working now, and until it does, our democracy and our republic is at risk. So we take steps. We take baby steps. We try to get this right. Why has no one sought to bar Trump from holding any office after what he did? Hard to say. So our work is cut out for us, and I'm sure everybody's sick of hearing about these same things and grabbing false hope from the witnesses that appear to be making still another case. But still the man is out. What other defendant in America could do anything like he's done and be out, not in custody, have a plane and not have to surrender his passport, live in lush quarters without having to report and pee every week like every other defendant awaiting trial? So my stories, small and large, abroad but mostly here, that's what we have to continue to work on. So here I am in my cathedral of trees, letting loose a little bit from my soapbox. All the best. Bye-bye.